Okay, day 107, part 4, and there's a couple of things here that I want to talk about. One is about these four phyces. I'll just use this 4 for G4S to represent the four phyces. And then the 3-page memo, it's not actually a 4-page memo. I want to talk about how effective it was to use a hashtag called release the memo. And then the last thing I want to talk to folks about is this 33-page PP dossier and how it launched four phyces, and the importance of seeing how the sources and methods were developed for that document as well. This just right in here between the forearm of a U.S. Marshal, the inside forearm tattoo of a U.S. Marshal, and the four phyces in his hand that it produced, tells the whole story of the last year of intrigue in the manipulation of the U.S. government. In one hand, in one left arm, of a U.S. Marshal, and the four phyces that he holds in his hand tells the whole story of the American government and the four coups, potential coups of the American government. Now, first thing I want to just get out of the way is just the facts that are coming out about the four phyces. There was only one. Devin Nunes didn't get to look at the four phyces. There was only one person that did look at it, which was Trey Gowdy from the Intelligence Committee, and then he had two handlers with him the whole time, and he looked at it over, I'll just use Robert Mueller's picture here to say over at FBI headquarters / DOJ headquarters, in a reading room, okay? So he's coming back, so we really don't know what was in the four phyces. We have this 3-page memo now, but what we really need now is to see the four phyces. Redact them for sure, so we don't see sources and methods of our PaperClip guys. That's fine. This would be our Russian PaperClip chain, not our Nazi PaperClip chain, but I'll use this as just general sources and methods representation here. What we need is to release these four phyces so we can see what happened. Then we need to see the four versions of this 33 pages, because the PP dossier, not only the PP phyces, the four PP phyces, but the four PP dossiers were created out of this. It started out as, I think, a 3-page document, went to a 12-page, and then it went to a 21-page. As they kept adding, and they kept having to add fluffery to get the fourth physa, right? And understanding who signed all these things, and then the text messages and the communications that supported that, really tells the story of the four coups. And I'll just use Heinrich Mueller here to represent Bob Mueller and the four coups, right? So this really tells the story. Now, the last thing is really the whole idea of PaperClip, okay, and how it was a noun, Operation PaperClip, and this idea of bringing people in and not bringing them in on a big boat and saying, oh, hey, all the Nazis are here, but rather cleverly bringing them in house to house. So you bring them one Nazi in over here in this program, one Nazi over here, and you do this in a gradual way, and you come into Northern Virginia with several houses. Those people move on to government jobs, and once they go to NASA or once they go to the national laboratories or government positions in like you create a DHS or go to CIA, and then you use those same houses and you keep moving people in. I described how this happened in Perth, Australia for people coming out of Rhodesia. This happened in Rhodesia for people coming out of the South Africa. This happened in South Africa for people coming out of Nazi Germany, etc. And the same thing can be true in all the cities of South America as well as the cities of North America. Okay, so paperclip becomes a verb now. Paperclip becomes a verb. Now, John left a comment this morning. I never said anything about Nazi houses. I agreed. I said, I put out a correction. I said I made a mistake. But then he said, well, my father never said anything about these methods, these Nazi methods. And I never said his father did. What I said was John and I completely agreed in this methodology. As a matter of fact, John made Macduff made a comment about how his father, how he had read this book called The Fourth Reich, which is exactly what we're talking about. And we're all in agreement. So we may be in violent agreement for some reason, but we're all in agreement that I agree with them that this is the chaining of these paper clips together is the methodology. Once we got one guy in NASA, we'll bring a whole bunch of people in NASA. Same thing with the Awans. Once we got one guy in DISA, get a whole chain going in DISA. Same thing with DHS and so forth. The whole DynCorp backbone, I think, has had paper clips come in. It's just this time, Bob Mueller set this up where with PTEC and so forth 20 years ago, that it would just happen to be, as an immigration lawyer, he was bringing in Pakistani ISI guys, intelligence operatives. But it's been the same thing with Heinrich Mueller. Mueller brought in all these Russian guys, Dmitry Alperovich, think of all his teams, and think of all the teams that have been brought in by the Klotzworthys and all these different names like the Krupniks and so forth are basically just an operative. You name whatever the handler is for recruiting the whole paperclip chain as you go through here. Let's say this is a paperclip, and then okay, I got one, I got two in my orbit, I got three in my orbit, and the Canceras orbit of little low-hanging satellites here. Well, how many satellite experts are you going to need for the project, Canceras? Canceras, you were in here yesterday telling me that you needed another 15. Well, how you doing about that? We got to paperclip more of these things in here. One guy references the next guy, the next references the gal before, et cetera, et cetera. And it's really these kind of programs that once you understand the methodology, it becomes very easy to take them apart and say, okay, where did these folks come from? How did they get in the country? Well, a chain migration. A chain migration, but maybe not as big as a chain that Trump was thinking of. It's a smaller chain. It maybe even down to a paperclip size. The Saipov truckers with the 20 Saipov truckers, the same thing. Hey, Krupniks are for crushing uranium. Saipov truckers are for trucking uranium. That's how we get those around. They come into the United States. Just talking with a couple of people running trucking organizations. They come in the United States barely able to speak English, but they already have a job. How could that be? How could that be? How could somebody come into the United States, already have a trucking job, and not be able to speak English? Okay, just talk to somebody who does that trucking training program, and I won't say where right now. I won't say. So anyway, I think we're all in agreement here that this methodology here, this paperclip methodology, is the secret to unwinding the whole intelligence community mess that with the chain migration, and also it explains the visa lottery, because it's not a lottery, it's just made to fool everybody. You think it's a lottery, but actually it's for the paperclip. People are putting satellites in their orbit in the paperclip. In Canceras's reality, it's real satellites and putting real satellite experts in place. Or down here, the Klotzworthy's the same way. But it could be for Klotzworthy's cell towers. You could have a paperclip chain for that, et cetera, et cetera. It could be another paperclip chain for small nuclear reactors, et cetera. Everything going on at the national laboratories, you could do a chain and do a chain migration. Here's Klotzworthy on doing the cell towers if you're doing a DHS project. And that is what I think we have. That is what I think we have. And in order to unwind all these paperclip chains to see what happened with all these dossiers, we need to unwind. The next step is the 4 FISAs, which will lead to the 33 pages, and will, just in one U.S. Marshal's inside left arm, holding 4 FISAs in his hand, unlocks the last maybe 50 years. And one other thing I'll add as a PS. Don't listen to this if you don't want to have that extra conspiracy theory. This is not conspiracy theory. Up until now, it's solid fact. Fourth Reich, Operation Paperclip, everyone agrees. But Robert Mueller's great-grandfather was also involved in quinine. He was a doctor in the Pittsburgh area, supplying quinine to the Civil War troops, potentially involved in that, and also potentially involved in kind of a secret police in the Civil War. And I'd always said this, the Pinkertons had kind of come out of, the Civil War into this kind of managing these rat lines. And I had said laudanum was the early derivative of in opium, when they really started using that as pain medication and selling that to both the Union side and the Confederate side. And it turns out that I believe Robert Mueller's in their past. So selling drugs to soldiers in Vietnam, or selling drugs to soldiers in World War II, or World War I for that matter, is old news to Robert Mueller. He goes all the way back with his family, all the way back to the Civil War with Gustav Mueller. And we're going to also find his great grandmother is a daughter of a railroad baron, which goes back to the Blue Bloods in the Yale area, and the Brown brothers Harriman being the railroad magnate.